And we will begin. So thank you everybody for joining this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from and where you're joining the screen share from. I think we have a lot of people from Australia on the call today. My name is Carol Chabella. I'm the CEO of Inference Solutions, and this webinar is part of a series of webinars that we're doing over the coming weeks to really provide a good overview of the IVR, the hosted IVR industry, voice automation technologies, digital transformation, and among other topics. And the session today is on building a business case for voice automation, and probably going to take us about half an hour to go through the presentation. Now, we're using a GoToWebinar for this, so if you've got any questions, the best way to ask those is there's a little question control panel that you can write your questions in. That'll make sure that I see those questions, and then we'll come to those at the end. Given the number of participants on the call, I've just got everyone on mute, so if you need to you can use the chat window as well. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so for those that don't know, who is Inference Solutions? We're essentially a pure software as a service company. We're known primarily for hosted IVR, both throughout Australia, New Zealand, and also in North America. I'm actually based now in the San Francisco office of the business, and we're a platform that's primarily focused on carriers and service providers. So the vast majority of our customers are large carriers, mid-sized carriers, service providers of various description, whether they be sort of traditional telephony providers or some of the emerging sort of telco players that are out there. Our tagline is revolutionising IVR, and that's what we're going to focus on today. We actually started life as an Australian company. If people are familiar with Telstra, we spun off from Telstra Research Labs a number of years ago, but we now have customers throughout the world, with most customers these days being based in the USA. Some of the biggest carriers in the world use Inference, and more are moving to the Inference Studio platform each month. There's quite several dozen service providers that now use the Inference Studio platform in one way or another. And the product we're best known for is Inference Studio, and I'll talk about Inference Studio at various points through the presentation this morning. All right, so some of you might be wondering the topic or the title of the presentation, building a case for voice automation. What is voice automation? Well, it's not really a term we use much anymore at Inference. We used to use it quite a bit. In fact, our old tagline used to be voice automation made simple, and the challenge for that is that a lot of people don't really understand what that means. Are you talking about automating calls? Are you talking about automating all sorts of traffic with callers? Is it outbound? Is it inbound? And so we moved away from that. But the reason why we named it that for this webinar is that actually we have a company blog, and one of the articles that's read more than any other is building a case for voice automation. So that's why the topic is as it is. But essentially, when we're talking about voice automation, it's really about automating the flow of customer calls into or out of your organisation. And really, we break these down into sort of three main categories. The first is what we call transaction processing, where you've got a particular transaction that you do often within your call center environment or with your customers, and you want to automate them entirely. Sort of like track this parcel or check this case or open a ticket. Those sorts of things are classic transactions, and they form the basis of a lot of business cases, but they're not the only ones. The others would be routing-based systems, basically getting calls to where they need to go in the network. You might be, for example, a retail chain with lots and lots of stores, and you need to get those calls to those stores in the most cost-effective manner you can, and in the quickest manner that you can. And then the third category is what we would call call assistance, and this is sort of partial automation. This is where the IVR or the network is doing something intelligent before the call gets to the agent, and you're assisting the agent with either a screen pop of information, or you're integrating with the CRM system and presenting information from the CRM to the agent to try and minimise that talk time and provide a better customer experience for the caller. So when we move into building business cases, the classic one we always hear of is the direct model. And that is, if I can remove X% of my calls from the call center, that's going to save me Y amount of dollars.
and it's going to save me Y amount of dollars each month, and that's going to build into the business case. Yeah, and sometimes this is pretty easy to work out. A lot of call centers, in terms of enterprise customers that we work with, use the 1 minute of talk time equals $1. Really, really simple. But the problem there is that it misses all of the indirect models, which are becoming increasingly important when we talk about business case development for voice automation. Because getting rid of calls you have is only part of the customer, service experience. So what about, for example, making calls that you don't currently make to customers because they're too cost prohibitive? What about personalizing calls so that as a customer arrives into your organization, they feel better about the relationship they have with you as a company? Or stopping calls before they even arrive in your business. You can imagine someone like a utility company or an insurance company, and a big event happens, a natural disaster. You're going to get thousands upon thousands of calls. What about if you made those calls for those people to stop them coming in and having a bad experience sitting in the queue? The sort of proactive customer care is becoming a really big part of the industry. And finally, what about making existing customers more happy? It may not be that saving 1 minute of every interaction is the business case. It might be that by automating the simple transactions, you can spend longer engaging with your customers about the things that really matter to them, things that you would not automate. Conversations, we talk about conversations versus transactions. You don't automate conversations. So what are these worth? This is the tricky part. Okay, so when you're building these cases, the biggest challenge is really CapEx and OpEx. How do you justify these expenses? And the problem with the traditional business case process is that you have to invest, you deliver, and then you realize the benefits. So if you make a mistake, if you get it wrong, you've already spent the money. The business case has already been signed off, and now you're trying to justify why you did what you did. And you might be able to push back on the vendor, and you might be able to say, well, vendor, you said we would save this amount of money by implementing this sort of process. We haven't, so what are you going to do to help us fix it? But the problem with that is as you move risk around, it just gets factored into the price. So we sometimes work with companies where they say, look, I got a really great deal, the vendor's taking all the risk. Well, maybe, but they're factoring it into that price because nobody understands your organization better than you, okay? And so if you're going to push that, if you're going to push that risk onto the vendor, they're just having to factor that into what it's going to cost them to deliver. So from an inference perspective, and the way that we approach business case development is that the only real way to win is to get rid of risk entirely. And that's what the rest of today's session is going to be about. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, firstly, here are the ways you can't do it. You can't sell somebody $1 million rack of equipment that they sit in their data center and then have a payback period based on some assumptions that you made. There's a lot of risk in that model. Similarly, I can't lock you into a 36-month managed service contract. That's like selling you the equipment and then just charging you incrementally for it. It doesn't remove the risk. It just delays the cash component of it. So instead, what you need is an approach where you can basically zero out the CapEx on the vendor side and on the customer side and try and get your services component as close to zero as possible. And this is really where Inference specializes. Okay, so let's use an example. Say you had a call center, maybe it has 10 agents in it, so it's a little one. Or maybe it's a really big call center, it has 1,000 or more than 1,000 agents in it. It doesn't really matter because the business case justification is the same. A typical call center today, with a telco provider in the Australian market, might have a premise-based ACD, running their PBX. It's installed in a closet under the stairs at an office park. I know a customer very, very well that has exactly this scenario where that piece of equipment was managed by an outsourced IT company. No one really wanted to touch it because no one really knew how it worked, and if it fell over, everyone was going to be in a lot of trouble. And anecdotally, let's imagine that this customer or this enterprise has heard or has concerns that the number of customers that are unhappy with them is growing, but they really can't be sure. There's no metrics. They're not measuring this in any way. So what do they want to do about it? Well, firstly, they need to measure it. And how do we measure it? Well, they come up with this idea that they just want to add surveying at the end of their agent interaction. Let's do a Net Promoter Score survey. It doesn't have to be Net Promoter Score. It could be something, but let's do something to start getting some of these metrics. So they go and they talk to their PBX ACD vendor, the company that has sold them that equipment that's sitting under the stairs there, and they say, yep, that's easy. All you need to do is you need to survey module. Sorry, that's just a module there on the screen. We can sell you that, no problem at all. But yes, it doesn't run on the version of the software that you have. So we're going to need to upgrade that software in that rack of equipment. And also, now that we're looking at it, it turns out that the call center software that comes with the version that you need to run the survey module, that's different as well. So we're going to have to retrain all your agents to use the new software. But that's okay. We're going to put together a business case. We're going to put together a project team. And I'm sure we can get this done in only a few months. And the emphasis here is a few months. But you're going to do all of this, and then you get to start to measure. So your time to be reactive to the problem has just blown out dramatically. So what I want to talk about is a totally different way of doing it. And that's firstly, we do everything in the cloud. We do it on exactly the same telephony links to the outside world as the customer already has today. So everything that they need, they already have. We're going to do it with zero CapEx, and we're going to do it with almost zero OpEx. And if we don't like what we produce, we're just going to turn it off. Essentially, there's zero risk. In fact, you'd be crazy not to try this because the incremental cost of trying this, even if you have another strategy, is almost nothing. But the possible benefits could be enormous. So what we're really trying to get to is allowing someone to buy the solution after it already works. Okay? And that's what I want to show. So before I show it, I want to make sure that everyone understands the building blocks here and what we actually mean by cloud delivery in this scenario. So on the right-hand side, we have our business sitting in the business park with its call center, its ACD, everything remains the same. Connecting to that is their carrier. In Australia, your carrier is probably going to be a Telstra, or it's going to be an Optus, or it's going to be someone like that. You've got existing interconnects between that carrier and yourself. Those don't change. And you've got your customers ringing into the PSTN, the public network, eventually making their way to your carrier. Now that's simplistic, how it's drawn there on the screen, but you get the idea. And the important thing here is that the inference cloud is integrated with that carrier core. Okay? So from the carrier's perspective, there's nothing really they need to do either. It's basically ready to try immediately. Okay, so what we're going to do now is build a new service on the fly. The example we're showing here is surveying. We could show lots of other different examples. This is just an easy one to show because everyone understands it. Everyone's experienced a survey in one form or another. Okay, so I'm just going to break out of that, and I'm just going to switch over to my studio view. And so I'll just check here that you're seeing what I'm seeing, and I can see that you are, so that's great. What I've done here is I've just logged into my account as the customer, and I've been shown here on the screen a list of the applications that my carrier, that I already have a relationship with, has given me access to. So in this case, there's one called Q4Me and one called Studio. Today we're talking about Studio, so I'm going to click on Studio. Now this is loading up the Studio interface, okay? And all we really want to do is we want to build a new service on the fly, we want to try it, and we essentially want to do it for free. So how do we do that? Well, at the top of the screen, it lets us know how many scripts we have. In Studio, everything is comprised of scripts. These represent IVR or telephony services that you as the customer have built. There's a concept called service numbers. So these are just phone numbers that your carrier has provided to you. So for example, if you are on the Telstra network, this is a Telstra phone number that Telstra has assigned for you to use. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to build a completely new service. Okay, so I'm going to go up to the script controller at the top here, the menu, and there's a little plus button. I'm going to click on the plus button, and I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call it My Survey. Now I did this demonstration yesterday, so this one's going to be My Survey number 2. Now I'm actually logged in here in the US POP because I'm based here in San Francisco. If you were in Australia, you'll be logging into the Australian POPs. There's 2 POPs in Australia already integrated to these carrier core networks in Melbourne and in Sydney. And so the list of languages that I have here is going to be different to the list of languages that you would see. But in my case, I'm going to pick US English. I'm going to pick from a list of voices. I'm going to pick the Lindsay voice. Again, these would be different depending on what you wanted to try. And I'm just going to click on Add. So this has built me now a new placeholder. There it is, my survey number 2. It's ready for me to flesh out what it's going to do. So I'm just going to click on that. And the first time I click on it, it asks me how would I like to build out the service. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. I can start with a completely blank canvas and build whatever I like. But what we're trying to show here is building something really, really fast. And so the feature that I'm going to use is this copy from template. So in Studio, because we work with a lot of carriers around the globe, we get a really good feeling for the types of things that people actually want to solve, the problems they want to solve. And so we make those available just as free templates for anyone to use. So if I look here, like here's an appointment maker, here's a collection application, here's an employee opinion survey. If I scroll further down, you'll see things like political campaigning, product recalls, just more and more and more. There's a team at Inference that literally builds these and adds them for free to the platform for everyone to try and use. Because ultimately, this platform is about promoting usage. If people don't use the platform, it doesn't generate any revenue. Okay, so all about usage. Now, right at the bottom of this list is Simple Net Promoter Score Survey, and that's the one I'm going to pick. And we might have future webinars on some of these other templates, or maybe a selection of templates, but for now, we'll just go straight to Simple Net Promoter Score Survey. I'm going to click on Continue. So what this is doing right now is in the cloud platform in Melbourne and replicating in Sydney, it is building for us the survey on the fly. And it's attaching it to the carrier network of our choice. Okay. Now, it's doing everything we need to get going with this service. So that means building all of the call flow. That's what you're seeing here on the screen. This sort of Visio-looking diagram is the call flow. It's building all of the prompting that you need to actually interact with the service on the phone. It's building all the databases to store all the survey responses. And it's building all the reports so you can understand what people are saying about your organisation, for example. Now, because it's a template, everything here is editable. So I can just click on any of these little boxes, we call these nodes, and I can modify this thing on the fly. If I needed to change the prompting, for example, I could just say, well, this is the introduction message. I'm going to click the edit button, and I can change the prompt here and now for this particular part of the dialogue. Okay. Now, what do we need to do to get this live onto the telco network? Well, all we need to do is map a phone number to it. So if I go back to that script menu and click on scripts again, now that I have that service built, I just need to assign a phone number to it, a service number. And I do that by going to the action menu and say map a number. Now, I've got one free number. There it is there, the free number. I'm going to map that number here. Again, remember this is a US number in this case. And I'm going to click on continue, and that is now live on the network. So we are literally now at a point that we can ring this service and connect it to our ACD. So all our ACD needs to do is redirect to this phone number, and you're basically in production. All right. So what I'm going to do on my phone here, just got my mobile phone here, I'm just going to ring that number, just so you can see that that service is actually now live. Just bear with me while I put that number in. 417 4585, and I'm just going to put it on speakerphone, and you can hear the interaction.
Hello, this is a call from our company. You recently contacted our call center. We are very interested in your feedback. This survey will take less than 2 minutes. Would you like to participate? Thanks. On a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is extremely unlikely and 10 is extremely likely, how likely are you to recommend us to your friends?
7.
Sorry, I didn't understand you. Thanks for taking the time to respond. Goodbye.
Sorry, I just had it on mute there when I was trying to press the button. So what you saw there is we basically rung in. Now, because of this particular script, we have speech recognition enabled, we have touch tone enabled. All of these technologies typically have their own business cases that need developed. But in this case, we can try all of these technologies without having to do anything because they're all being pre-integrated into the Studio platform. And this extends beyond just speech recognition, touch tone, and TTS. You know, there are more and more, as a cloud platform, there are more and more technologies that are being added into this stack every month. So, for example, voice biometrics was added earlier this year. PCI compliant payments for credit card processing was added mid-year. We're currently in the process of adding call recording and speech analytics. So by the end of the year, you'll be able to do all of those things as well. So you can try all these things, technologies which generally in their own right have complex business cases, and prove to yourself whether they're going to work in your organization or not, using the carrier that you already do business with, without having to make any changes, any CapEx, and virtually never no OpEx, because it's only when you use these services then you actually get charged for them. Okay. All right. So let me now switch back to the presentation. Okay. So we've gone through that one. So what did we show? Essentially, we built a new service. Okay, so the service was completely, in this case, that service was provisioned in Virginia. It was replicated instantly to Chicago in dual data centers here in the US. If we had done the demonstration on the Australian portal, it would be built in Melbourne, it would be replicated to Sydney. You would have an SLA, just like any other part of the telco network. It would be going in over that carrier-grade network. There's no over-the-top plays here. There's no, we're using the internet or anything like that. No, this is all core connected stuff. So we've built that new service. As I just mentioned, it could be tied through our existing services to our common carrier backbone. And depending on your carrier, the costs to get calls into this service and back from this service to your PBX, in many cases that will be free, because this is just part of the enterprise that your company represents for that carrier. It's just like as if you were transferring from one group of agents to another group of agents. It looks no different as far as the carrier is concerned, or from one site to another site. It looks no different as far as the carrier is concerned. The service cost us virtually nothing to build. Okay, we requested an account, we were given an account. If the service didn't work for us, we could turn that off. If the service needed to be modified, we could modify it on the fly. If we wanted somebody to modify it on our behalf, we wanted to engage services, we have professional services partners that will do that for you. Or you can say, look, I'd like to be trained and use the product myself. We run training courses to allow people to do this as well, and we run those all the time. It costs virtually nothing to try, and just to reiterate, the cost of the service is driven entirely by the usage of it. Okay. So in effect, we showed what we wanted to achieve. We showed that the system is going to work before we actually had to pay for it. Imagine you were building a business case, in a large enterprise in Australia, and you wanted to show the effectiveness of post-call surveying. The easiest way to do that is to do a system like this, try it for a period of time, and actually show the results to your stakeholders. To say, here it is working, this is the opt-in rate, this is what people are saying, this is our net promoter score, this is how it's trending over time, and basically prove to everybody involved that it's going to work before you actually have to buy it. All right, so I'm actually going to, it is 22 past the hour, I'm going to stop there and just return back to some of our more complex cases that I mentioned earlier. What about making calls we don't currently make? So if you recall earlier, this is one of those business cases that I said is one of the harder ones to justify. Okay, so one of the reasons people don't make these calls is because they're too expensive to make. Okay, if you are running, I mean, I've worked in many organizations that might have a traditional vendor as their PBX, and we all know who the usual suspects are there. And they might say, look, we'd really like to turn our inbound call center into an outbound call center. We want to make calls. We want to be proactive with our customers. What do we need to buy in order to do that? And they might need to buy a dialer. Now, depending on the size of your call center, that dialer might be a 7-figure investment. It's going to be at least 6 figures, but I've seen many that are 7 figures. So are you going to justify spending that to work out that actually your callers don't really want to be called? Maybe they're quite happy with the engagement, or maybe the opt-in rate is too low. Or would you like to just try it through a cloud delivery model and see what it's like, and then decide, yeah, this is something that we want to do. You can do this now. What about personalizing calls for each customer? If you look at the market out there, and you look at the types of articles that people are writing about customer care, a lot of them are around personalization of calls. The problem with personalization of calls is it's really hard to measure the payback period of that investment. Okay, so I ring into an organisation, it refers to me by name, it knows what I've been doing, in terms of if I booked an airline ticket, it knows that I've got an upcoming flight, it knows my frequent flyer status or whatever. That's all really good, I'm impressed by that, but am I more likely to buy from that customer, or am I more likely to recommend that to my friends and family? If that is a harder sell. Okay, so it's much trickier for these personalisation business cases to get up because of the risk associated with what's the payback period. And again, we can try all of that. We can integrate with CRM. We can look up databases. We can personalise prompting. We can do conditional menus and branching based on people's profile without any CapEx. Okay. What about stopping calls before they arrive? As I mentioned before, this is one of the fastest growing areas in the industry. Proactive customer care, outbound calling to stop calls coming into you. The problem with this is that, okay, these calls need to be made during an outage. They need to be made at 10 o'clock at night. They need to be made on a Sunday morning. That's very expensive to do using labour, okay? And so again, being able to try these things using cloud technologies makes a lot of sense. And what about making customers more happy, existing customers more happy? Again, one of the really difficult business cases to justify because the payback period is very uncertain. You might be able to minimise churn through identification, but you're not going to know that ahead of time. You're only going to know that maybe 6 months in or 12 months in. Okay? And so again, a CapEx-based model, even a managed service-based model around making existing customers more happy is difficult in many cases to get up. Okay. All right, so as I mentioned at the start of the call, we're going to go for half an hour, and we're just coming up on 26 minutes now. So I'm just going to switch out to the menu here and just see if there's any questions. If you've got any questions, please let me know. Just use the little question and answer tool as part of the GoToWebinar interface, and they'll be able to respond to that. All right, so I'll just wait for a couple of minutes for questions to arrive. If there are no questions, I'd like to thank everyone for their time, and I'd just like to reiterate that this is part of a series of webinars that we're doing. I just happen to be one of the first participants as the CEO. This is my take on how to build a business case based on my experience in the industry. A lot of other webinars that are going to come out in this series are going to be from other parts of our organisation, whether it be operations team, if you're interested in how cloud operations work, maybe the development team and the guys that actually build scripts for customers and what they're seeing in the market. These sorts of things are what you can expect to hear and see in the upcoming webinar series. So we ask that if you are interested in those, you can sign up on our website and basically get notification, and you'll see postings of the upcoming webinars on our website as well. All right, so I'll just check again. Okay, so I have no questions coming in, so that is fine. And actually, here we go. I've got a question now from someone. Let me just maximise that so I can read it properly. Okay. Okay, so one question is, can I access tutorials via Inference to guide me in building solutions? Absolutely. If you go to wiki.inferencesolutions.com, that's the customer-facing wiki. You won't need a username or a password to access that. You'll be able to go straight in and start using all of the things there in terms of articles about different functionality of the platform, as well as tutorials on how to build certain things. I would add that there's a lot more content coming to that wiki soon. It is pretty good as a reference point of view. Where we want to improve on it is more and more of these interactive video style presentations, and we expect you'll see more of those. You'll also be able to get the webinar content at that wiki as well. Okay, we have another question here is, will Studio be able to build and support standard call center metrics scorecards? That's a really good question. So, it's a bit more of an advanced topic, but one of the things that's really important about IVR is measuring things. If you can't measure it, it's hard to justify it. And so what we allow in Studio is we basically allow you to log any information at any point in the dialogue, and we allow you to do, there's no cost associated with doing that. You can create your own what we call data stores on the platform to store information that you care about. So maybe, for example, you care about the hold time in the IVR, well, you can log that. Maybe you care about the dropout rate, the containment rate in the IVR, you can log that. Maybe you care about, are people having problems with any point in the dialogue? Are they keying in things that we don't understand? Are they saying things we don't understand? You can log all of that as well. And once you have those stats in your data stores, you can then build what we call reports using the report builder. It's just a standard part of Studio. So for example, if I just switch back to the interface 4 and I go up to global, you see on the right-hand side we have this report controller. I click on reports, and this is showing me the reports that are automatically being built for this particular application. In this case, one of the reports that's been built is the actual survey responses. That's a really useful report for a survey. And we see we rang it once and we gave it a 7, and that's the 7 is what's shown on the screen. Now, all of these reports are API enabled. Okay, so I don't have to log in and view the report here in Studio. I can create a little webhook that allows me to put this report anywhere that I like. So I can put that on my intranet. I can put that in a mobile application. I can put that in some other interface and literally just have it retrieve the information out of Studio. So if you had a call center wallboard, for example, and you wanted to show the IVR containment rate, and you wanted to show the average survey score, and you want to show the average handling time, you could have that running in real time on the screen. And again, this is all just part of the product. You don't need to really invest in extra software or modules or whatever to do any of this stuff. Okay. So standard call center metrics. If you've got some specific metrics in mind, I'm happy to talk about those. But to answer your question quickly, yes. And basically, it's fully extensible. You can basically have full control over what you see, what you care about, what matters to your organization, and report on that both inside the tool and outside the platform if you want to pull it into a third-party system as well. Okay, so I think that is all of the questions. No further questions? All right. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending. We had quite a few attendees today, so very pleasing. I'll go back later and see where everyone arrived from. And yeah, stay tuned for the next series, the next in the series of webinars, and you'll find out about that on our website. So thank you everyone today. Have a good rest of your day. Good morning if you're in Australia, and good afternoon if you've called in from America somewhere. And talk to you soon.